So hi, my name's Bill Heaton, and I'm co-owner of Big Elm Brewing in Sheffield. My wife, Christine, is the brewmaster at Big Elm, and I've been a professional brewer for 20 years, and I really love beer. It's a fascinating mix of art, science, and history, and tonight we're going to discuss some of that history. Since the dawn of time, there has been fermentation. The yeast and bacteria responsible for fermentation are some of the oldest creatures on the planet. Yeast are an amazing fungi. And beer has been worshipped and scorned, sometimes in the same night, but all we can really say is that mankind has a love affair with fermentation. Almost every culture all over the world makes beer and has made beer for millennia. The oldest written recipe for beer is over 8,000 years old. It was inscribed on a clay tablet, and the archaeological records indicate that beer has been brewed for many thousands of years prior to that recipe being found. The recipe was unearthed in ancient Samaria, which is now the country of Iraq. It's called the Hymn to Ninkasi. Ninkasi was the Sumerian goddess of beer. Anthropologists consider the dawn of the Sumerian culture also the dawn of man's recorded history, and there is sound reason to think that beer and modern human civilization began at roughly the same time. Wild barley was first domesticated over 13,000 years ago, and beer is made from barley. Barley was such a prized food, it was also one of the first currencies in primitive cultures. Anthropologists believe that man settled down from hunter-gatherer nomadic existence to grow grain to make beer. In all ancient societies and all ancient religions, beer was a gift to women from a goddess, never a male god. And women remained the brewers and sellers of beer until the major industrial age of man. During these same periods, beer was also being produced in almost every culture around the world. In Egypt, beer was regarded as food. In fact, the Egyptian hieroglyph for meal was an image of bread and beer. This bread-beer meal plus a couple of onions and some dried fish was the standard diet of that time. Beer was made from barley and emmer, which is an ancient wheat, and flavored with ginger or honey. Even the slaves building the pyramids were paid with beer. Today, it has been proven that the process of fermentation increases fourfold the vitamin and mineral content of plain seeds or grain. Yeast adds additional and substantial levels of protein and vitamins B and C. A recent chemical analysis of the bones of ancient Nubians showed that they were regularly consuming tetracycline, which occurs because of fermentation. The archaeological evidence, man and beer have had a close and unique relationship ever since the very beginning of society. Beer is intimately connected with the transition of mankind from primitive to civilized society. People take their beer seriously, as illustrated by the Edict of Danzig, and with the growth of urban societies, beer snobbery was born. So here in America, it's kind of interesting. The Mayflower landed in Plymouth because the ship ran out of beer. It was in the captain's log that states, "Our victuals being much spent, especially our beer, as the reason to stop in Plymouth." So America was basically founded because of beer. During the Industrial Revolution, immigrants from Europe streamed into the United States, bringing brewing heritage with them. Families like the Bushes, the Millers, the Yinglings, and hundreds of other families opened breweries during the 1800s. The American lager has only been around since 1842, and it was only because German immigrant Johann Wagner brought lager yeast over from Germany in his pocket. Brattle Farm, right here in Pittsfield, they were growing barley and malting it as early as 1763. It's one of the oldest operating farms, and it's still in operation today. The locals bought the malt and brewed a mild ale of sufficient strength to preserve the brewage healthful and palatable. Pittsfield was also home to a huge brewery prior to Prohibition. This is the original Berkshire Brewing Association. It was on Columbus Ave, and they were producing 75,000 barrels of beer before they closed during Prohibition. That's 2.3 million gallons of beer. They were sold as far away as the Carolinas. And all of this changed because of Prohibition, which reared its ugly head in 1919. Tens of thousands of people lost their jobs, including here in Pittsfield. And Prohibition was just a hugely failed experiment. And beer, by the way, was legal for over 9 months before wine or liquor became legal. Because FDR knew that beer was truly the beverage of moderation. But thousands of family breweries had closed due to Prohibition, and a whole generation of people grew up not tasting real beer. They were hooked on light, sugary soda that sort of filled the void. And the brewers that had made it through Prohibition after Prohibition, decided to create less flavorful beer to attract this new audience. So America's breweries during World War II started to see consolidation brought on by corporations that were homogenizing the American food system. And American brewing heritage was, and as was the world's, was on the verge of disappearing. And by the late 70s, there was less than 100 breweries in the United States. Prior to Prohibition, there was over 2,000. This is a really great chart. It starts from 1873 and ends in 2015. And one great thing came out of the American brewery consolidation, and that was craft beer. Legalized homebrewing in 1978, thank you, Jimmy Carter, basically opened the floodgates for brewers like me to get into this business. Today in America, we lead the way. This is the greatest time in history to be a brewer or consumer of beer ever. The rest of the world, including Germany and England, are now looking at us, the American craft brewing scene, for leadership. There are more styles of beer, more types of varieties being made. Right now, it's pretty amazing. And right here in Berkshire County, we have 5 breweries that I know of, and there might be more because there's an average of 2 breweries opening every day right now in the United States. You got Bright Ideas, got Wandering Star, Shire, I don't know if they're open yet, Barrington and Big Elm. And it just seems crazy right now. There's 5,300 breweries and counting right now in the United States. But people aren't drinking more, they're actually drinking less because it's more about flavor and less volume. So again, please go out and support your local brewery, because we're an important part of our society.